You work. You repeat. You expect movement. Nothing moves. The hours accumulate, but the visible result stays at zero. Not low, zero. No signal, no acknowledgement, no shift in position. You begin to suspect something is wrong with the effort itself. But the effort is not the problem. What you are facing is a phase where output is deliberately invisible. A phase where the system does not return feedback on demand. Most people interpret this as failure. They slow down, adjust, or stop entirely. Not because the work is ineffective, but because it is not being seen. This is where separation begins. There is a version of you that requires visible progress to continue. And there is a version that continues without it. The second version is not driven by results. It is anchored in execution without confirmation. When nothing shows, the structure is being tested. Not your skill. Your continuity. You reach the point where effort and evidence disconnect. You execute the same actions. You show up at the same time. You apply the same force. But the external world does not register it. No increase in status. No measurable gain. No reaction from others. The surface remains unchanged. This is where most people begin to negotiate with themselves. They reduce intensity. They start looking sideways. They question the path, not because the path is unclear, but because the path is silent. Silence becomes interpreted as rejection, and rejection triggers withdrawal. But nothing has rejected you. You have entered a compression phase. In this phase, output is stored, not displayed. The system withholds visible returns while internal alignment is being built. Skills tighten. Repetition removes excess. Movements become more precise, but none of it is announced. There is no audience for this stage. The mistake is expecting recognition during construction. Recognition belongs to exposure. You are not in exposure. You are still being formed. The ones who leave at this point never see the shift. They exit before the structure stabilizes. They confuse delay with denial. They assume that because nothing is visible, nothing is happening. But the absence of visible results is not empty space. It is concealed accumulation. There is a threshold you cannot see. Before that threshold, everything feels static. After it, everything appears sudden. Outsiders will call it fast progress. They will call it natural talent. They will say it came out of nowhere. It did not. It remained hidden long enough to look instant. This is why discipline cannot depend on feedback. Feedback is inconsistent. It arrives late. It often arrives after the point where most people have already stopped. If your execution is tied to visible confirmation, your output will always collapse before it compounds. So the condition is simple. You continue without signal. Not blindly. Not emotionally. But structurally. You remove the need to see progress in order to produce progress. You replace reaction with repetition. You execute the next unit of work without referencing the last result. This is where identity begins to override perception. You are no longer someone who works when results appear. You are someone who works whether they appear or not. And that shift is not visible either. But it changes everything that follows. The longer you remain in this phase, the more friction begins to appear, not from the work itself, but from the environment around you. People start asking questions. What are you getting from this? Is it even working? Why not try something else? These are not attacks. They are reflections of a results-based mindset. A mindset that measures value only when it becomes visible. And because your work has not yet crossed the visibility threshold, it gets categorized as unproductive. You feel the pressure to explain, to justify, to translate something that, by its nature, cannot yet be shown. This is where most structures break, not from internal weakness, but from external noise. The individual begins to adjust behavior to reduce that noise. They shift direction slightly, then slightly more, until the original path is no longer intact. The work fragments, not because it failed, but because it was interrupted. Silence requires containment. If you expose unfinished work to constant evaluation, you introduce instability. Every opinion becomes a variable. Every doubt becomes a potential deviation. The process loses its linearity. So containment becomes part of discipline. You reduce unnecessary exposure. You limit explanation. You allow the work to remain unverified by others while it is still forming. Not as secrecy, but as structural protection. Because at this stage, visibility is not an advantage. It is a risk. There is also another layer most people do not account for. Your own perception begins to distort. When you see no results, your mind starts searching for patterns. It tries to detect progress where none is visible. It overanalyzes minor changes. It creates false signals. Then, when those signals don't hold, it swings in the opposite direction, poor doubt. This oscillation wastes energy. You move from it's working to it's not working without any real data to support either position. Your state becomes reactive, even though nothing external has changed. The disciplined response removes interpretation. You do not ask whether it is working. You ask whether it is being executed. That is the only variable under your control in this phase. Execution becomes binary. It was done or it was not. No emotional layer attached. No narrative built around it. This simplifies the system. It removes unnecessary decision points. It prevents drift caused by overthinking. Because overthinking in a silent phase is not analysis. It is erosion. The ones who maintain stability here operate differently. They do not seek reassurance. They do not adjust based on absence. They do not attempt to accelerate visibility. They maintain input consistency while the output remains hidden. And over time, something begins to shift, not externally at first, but internally in how the work is carried. It becomes quieter, more controlled, less dependent on how it feels, more aligned with what it requires. At that point, you are no longer waiting for results. You are building something that will eventually make waiting irrelevant. What makes this phase dangerous is not the lack of results. It is the illusion of stagnation. Stagnation suggests that nothing is changing, that the system is idle, that effort is being wasted. But in reality, the system is active, just not in a way that produces immediate, visible output. You are not standing still. You are being recalibrated. Every repetition is reducing inefficiency. Every cycle is stripping away excess movement, excess thought, excess hesitation. The work begins to compress. It becomes tighter, sharper, less visible to the outside, but more effective underneath. This is where superficial effort gets exposed. Because when there is no reward, no recognition, no signal, only real structure remains. Anything built on motivation, validation, or short-term expectation starts to collapse. It cannot sustain itself without reinforcement. So it disappears. And what is left is either nothing, or something solid. Most people discover, at this stage, that their system was never stable. It was dependent. Dependent on feedback loops. Dependent on visible progression. Dependent on emotional engagement. Remove those, and the system shuts down. That shutdown is not failure. It is revelation. It shows you exactly what your discipline was built on. If it was built on outcomes, it cannot survive in their absence. If it was built on identity, it does not require them. This is the dividing line. You either rebuild your structure so that execution becomes independent of results, or you continue to chase conditions that allow you to feel productive without actually becoming consistent. And rebuilding is not conceptual. It is mechanical. You remove unnecessary variables. You define the action. You repeat it at fixed intervals. You reduce decision-making. You eliminate negotiation. The work becomes less expressive, more exact, less influenced by how you feel in the moment, more governed by what has already been decided. This creates a different kind of pressure. Not emotional pressure, but structural pressure. You are no longer asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" You are operating under a system where the action occurs because it is scheduled, not because it is desired. That shift removes friction in one area, but introduces it in another. Now the resistance is not about starting. It is about maintaining precision over time. Because repetition without variation can feel static. And the mind resists static conditions. It looks for change, stimulation, interruption. If you allow that, the system breaks. So discipline, at this level, is not about intensity. It is about containment. You hold the pattern in place long enough for it to transform you, even when it appears to do nothing. Even when it feels like nothing is happening. Because what is happening is not designed to be felt. It is designed to become permanent. At this stage, the absence of results begins to harden into something else. Not doubt. Fatigue. Not physical fatigue, structural fatigue. The kind that builds when repetition continues without interruption, without variation, without visible return. The system starts to feel closed. The pattern feels endless. And the mind begins to search for an exit, not because it is overwhelmed, but because it cannot detect progression. This is where subtle breakdowns begin. You don't stop entirely. You adjust. Slight delays. Minor compromises. Small reductions in precision. Nothing dramatic, just enough to introduce variation. Just enough to feel like something has changed. But those small shifts accumulate. They weaken the structure. Because this phase is not designed to tolerate inconsistency. It is designed to reinforce exactness. Every deviation, no matter how small, disrupts the compression that has been building. And compression is the entire point. Without it, there is no threshold. Without threshold, there is no shift. So the demand increases. Not in volume, but in accuracy. You are required to execute the same action, in the same way, under the same conditions, without adjusting for how it feels. This is where most systems fail, not from lack of effort, but from lack of precision over time. Consistency is not repeating something often. It is repeating something exactly. That distinction becomes critical here. Because approximate repetition produces approximate results. And approximate results never accumulate enough pressure to break through the invisible barrier you are facing. So the system tightens. You begin to notice smaller details. Timing becomes more exact. Movements become more controlled. Decisions become fewer. The process loses flexibility, but gains stability. This is not comfortable. Flexibility feels easier. It allows adjustment. It allows relief. But it also allows drift. And drift is what keeps you below the threshold. So flexibility is removed. Not completely, but enough to prevent deviation. This creates a different kind of environment. Less reactive. Less expressive. More contained. You are no longer adapting the work to your state. You are forcing your state to match the work. And that reversal is where identity begins to lock in. Because once your state is no longer dictating your actions start dictating your state. You become aligned with the structure, not the other way around. At this point, the lack of results is no longer the primary challenge. Irrelevance is. The work feels disconnected from any immediate outcome. It exists on its own, without feedback, without acknowledgement, without visible impact. It starts to feel like it doesn't matter. And that is the final filter. Because if the work only continues when it feels relevant, it will never reach the point where it becomes undeniable. Relevance is assigned after the result, not before it. So you continue. Without signal. Without variation. Without the need for it to matter in the moment. Because what you are building does not require immediate importance. It requires completion. By the time you reach this layer, the process has stripped away almost everything that once made the work feel engaging. There is no novelty, no variation, no visible reward. What remains is repetition in its most reduced form, controlled, deliberate, and indifferent to how it is perceived. This is where most people introduce distraction, not as a break, but as a substitute. They begin to layer other activities on top of the core process. Small interruptions, new inputs, additional goals. Not because they are necessary, but because the original structure feels too narrow, too quiet, too unresponsive. But every added layer competes with the primary system. It divides attention. It reduces pressure. And without pressure, the accumulation weakens. So the discipline here is subtraction, not addition. You begin removing anything that does not directly reinforce the core action. You narrow the field. You reduce noise. You eliminate parallel efforts that dilute focus. This creates an environment that feels almost empty. But it is not empty. It is concentrated. All available energy is directed into a single channel. No leakage. No dispersion. The system becomes dense. And density changes how progress behaves. Instead of spreading thin across multiple directions, it builds in one place. Slowly, silently, without indication. The outside still shows nothing. But internally, the pressure is increasing. This is the stage where patience is often misunderstood. Patience is not waiting passively. It is maintaining structure under conditions that offer no immediate return. It is holding the line when there is no evidence that the line matters. That requires a different kind of control. Not emotional control, but environmental control. You manage your inputs. You regulate your exposure. You prevent unnecessary interference. You protect the conditions that allow repetition to remain uninterrupted. Because interruption resets accumulation. Even if the action resumes later, the continuity has been broken. The pressure drops. The system has to rebuild what was lost. So continuity becomes non-negotiable. You begin to treat breaks differently. Not as relief, but as risk. Not all breaks are harmful, but unstructured ones introduce variability. And variability, at this stage, delays the threshold. Everything becomes measured. Not in terms of outcome, but in terms of preservation. Does this action preserve the structure, or does it weaken it? If it weakens it, it is removed. If it preserves it, it stays. This creates a kind of isolation. Not social isolation, but operational isolation. Your process no longer depends on external alignment. It runs independently. It does not require synchronization with others. It does not adjust to external pace. It maintains its own rhythm. And that rhythm becomes the only reference point. Not results. Not feedback. Not comparison. Just execution. At this point, you are no longer trying to see results. You are ensuring that when they arrive, they have no choice but to appear. By now, the structure is no longer fragile. It does not depend on how the day feels. It does not require the right conditions. It does not respond to external pace. The system runs because it has been locked into place through repetition that was never interrupted. This is where a different shift begins. Not in visibility. In inevitability. Up to this point, everything has been uncertain. You could stop, and nothing would immediately collapse. You could continue, and nothing would immediately appear. The process existed in a neutral state, active, but unconfirmed. That neutrality is ending. Because once repetition reaches a certain level of precision and density, the outcome is no longer optional. It becomes a matter of time, not possibility. But this is also where a new risk appears. Premature recognition. Not from others, from yourself. You begin to sense that something is building. The work feels sharper. The execution feels cleaner. There is less resistance, less noise, less internal friction. And from that, a subtle anticipation forms. You start expecting the result. Not demanding it, but waiting for it. That waiting changes your state. It introduces tension. And tension disrupts precision. Because now, part of your attention is no longer on execution. It is on arrival. You begin to look for signs. You check for feedback. You measure progress more frequently. And in doing so, you slightly alter the process. Not enough to notice immediately, but enough to reduce the consistency that created the pressure in the first place. This is where discipline must tighten again. You remove anticipation the same way you remove doubt. You do not allow yourself to lean forward. You stay where the work is. Because the moment you shift focus toward results, even when they are close, you reintroduce instability. The system does not respond to expectation. It responds to exact repetition over time. So you return to neutral execution. No projection. No prediction. No internal signal that something is about to happen. Just the same controlled action, repeated under the same conditions, with the same level of precision. This is where most people break, even after coming this far. Not because they failed to build the structure, but because they tried to witness the result too early. They stepped out of the process at the exact point where staying inside it would have completed it. So the rule remains unchanged. You do not look up. You do not check. You do not shift. You continue. And you continue in the same way you did when there was nothing, because to the system, there is still nothing. Until the threshold is crossed, the correct behavior does not change. And once it is crossed, you will not need to confirm it. It will be visible without your permission. At the final stretch before the threshold, the system reaches a state where continuation no longer feels like effort. Not because it has become easy, but because resistance has been removed from the decision layer. There is no longer a question of whether the action will happen. That question was eliminated earlier. What remains is execution without negotiation, repeated at a level that no longer triggers internal conflict. This creates a quiet state. Not calm in the emotional sense, but stable in the operational sense. The work no longer produces spikes. No frustration from lack of results. No anticipation of arrival. No reaction to external input. Everything unnecessary has already been stripped away. What remains is the core loop. And the core loop runs. This is where the process becomes difficult to interrupt, not because of discipline in the traditional sense, but because interruption no longer fits into the structure. It would require a reintroduction of variables that have already been removed. So the system continues forward, not by force, but by design. At this point, time behaves differently. Earlier, time felt slow. Each session felt disconnected. Each repetition felt isolated. Now, the repetitions begin to merge. The gaps between them shrink in significance. The work becomes continuous, even when it is technically segmented. This continuity is what most people never reach. Because they reset too often. They stop, restart, adjust, reconsider. And each reset breaks the chain. It returns them to the beginning of accumulation, where nothing is visible and everything feels uncertain. But here, there is no reset. Only continuation. And continuation, over extended duration, creates inevitability. Not the kind that can be predicted. The kind that cannot be avoided. The structure has been held long enough, with enough precision, under enough constraint, that the outcome is no longer dependent on external factors. It has already been determined by the consistency of the input. The visible result is simply delayed confirmation. Nothing more. This is why the final requirement is not intensity. It is restraint. You do not accelerate. You do not expand. You do not attempt to capitalize on what is about to emerge. Because any deviation now, even in the direction of progress, introduces instability. The system does not need improvement. It needs completion. So you maintain the exact pattern that brought you here. No additions. No reductions. No interpretation. Just the same execution, held in place long enough for the external layer to catch up with what has already been built internally. And when it does, it will not feel like a breakthrough. It will feel like a delayed reflection of something that was finished long before it became visible. What you called no results was never absence. It was delay without permission to observe. Everything you built has already taken form, but not in the layer you were looking at. You expected confirmation in the external field, where outcomes are displayed. But the work was completing in a different layer, where outcomes are decided. That is why nothing appeared. Because appearance was never the phase you were in. You were in completion. And completion does not announce itself. It does not signal readiness. It does not provide evidence. It finishes in silence, then allows the surface to catch up later. This is why the shift, when it comes, feels disconnected from effort. It appears sudden, unrelated, almost accidental. But that is only because you were not allowed to see it forming. Now the structure is already set. There is nothing left to adjust. Nothing left to optimize. Nothing left to question. Only one condition remains. Do not break it now. Not by reacting. Not by accelerating. Not by stepping outside to verify. Because the moment you change the pattern, you interfere with the final alignment between what has already been built and what is about to become visible. So you hold. The same way you held when there was nothing. The same way you executed when there was no signal. No change in behavior. No shift in rhythm. No interpretation of what is about to happen. Because what is about to happen does not require your involvement anymore. It only requires your non-interference. You do not push it forward. You do not pull it closer. You do not look for it. You let it emerge. And when it does, it will not feel like achievement. It will feel like confirmation of something you finished long ago, without ever being allowed to see it.